Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and thank you for joining us on this special edition of Tell Me Your Story, as we give you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. We are also on this special edition of Tell Me Your Story, as well as podcasting at SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, and other locations that you folks are reposting our interviews to. Thank you for doing that. I am what I like to call a one-man band. In addition to doing the interviews and producing them and getting all of the audio edited, I also edit the video so that you can watch us on YouTube. That's right, we are on YouTube. The YouTube channel is, of course, Richard Dugan and Tell Me Your Story. Just look for the guy with the black hat. And we also hope that you will continue to watch these videos as well as listen to the podcasts and subscribe on YouTube or Spotify or any of the other locations. And if you like what we're doing and it resonates with you and you can support us financially, we would be so gratefully appreciative. And that's why we have a PayPal account for your security as well as ours. And we also ask you to participate in the year that was, but now the decade that is, of perfect vision, the 2020s. Spend that time going within and listening to that still small voice so that you can get the guidance and the inspiration, the encouragement, and all of the good things in life that will help you through your days, weeks, months, and years, as long as you choose to be here. And I hope that you choose to be here right up until the day that you are whether it's called home or you decide to go. I know people who they actually consciously choose to depart. And I don't mean by taking their lives. They have discovered the way, just as the ancient yogis have, of just leaving this vessel. It is possible. Now, I don't have the technique. I don't know how it's done. I know people who have had near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences. Not something I've experienced, but hey, you know what? That's okay. I don't need to know all of that to know that this life is pretty darn incredible, and I hope that you and I can share it together, especially through these programs. Today's program is one that we are going to have a returning guest with us, and we're going to be talking about the work that he is doing. Kingsley Guy is my guest, and I want to welcome you back to the program. Author, journalist, and most importantly, especially for this program, storyteller. It's great to have you back.
Thank you, Richard. It's great to be back. Enjoyed our last visit and really look forward to the current one.
Yeah, well, this time around, I'm going to grill you like Mike Wallace on 60 Minutes.
Okay.
You have
a great journalist, Mike Wallace was.
Yes, he was. His style was certainly something that you had to develop a taste for it. But boy, he got down to the nuts and bolts, didn't he? He did indeed. He did. Well, we're going to try, but a little less abrasive. We're going to talk about your latest work, Piercing the Veil. It's a skeptical journalist's discovers unseen worlds. And basically, have you ever examined your life and wondered, is this all there is? And there's a song in there somewhere, isn't there, Kingsley?
Yes, there is.
Is that all there is?
Writer Steele, what can I say?
There you go. Absolutely. And many people, that's kind of where they're at. And I sometimes find myself thinking that even with all of the wonderful conversations I've had on this program, with all of the study that I've done over the last 40 or 50 years, with all of the books I've read and the workshops I've been through, every once in a while I go, really? This is it? But I will say that in terms of the whole aspect, as I mentioned earlier in the program, as we've just gotten started, I have to believe that there is something more beyond this, and that this has some relevance, because if all of this is just some bizarre accident, somebody's idea of a joke, and then there are lights out. And by the way, if it is lights out after we leave this body, we aren't going to know, right?
Absolutely won't.
But my brain tells me there's something more, not just beyond this life, but in this life as well. Talk to us about this aspect of piercing the veil. Many people, they conceive of that veil as having to do with the crossover point into the next, I want to say the next realm, if you will, of our existence, because we are, Kingsley, are we not immortal on the spiritual level?
I believe we are, and I think what you're talking about has been a driving force for humanity from time of Neanderthal man. Frankly, you look at some of the burial sites of Neanderthals. We obviously honored their dead. Probably a belief that it isn't, this wasn't the end. Then Homo sapiens developed, the whole culture of Homo sapiens. Moving forward and evolving, their consciousness indicates that there was a deep-seated belief in an afterlife from the beginning of humanity. Now, my book, Piercing the Veil: A Skeptical Journalist Discovers Unseen Worlds. I spent a career in a very, very materialistic profession, and I was a very successful journalist in South Florida, and was the editorial page editor of a major newspaper. I hit 40 years old, and I had that existential crisis. I discovered I was alcoholic, which launched me on a spiritual journey that took me beyond the veil. I followed many synchronicities. I followed where I believe spirit was leading me into some amazing states of consciousness, witnessed amazing things that cannot be explained through the Newtonian materialistic viewpoint that so much of our society operates today, particularly scientists. And I think we're on a cusp where even science is now starting to realize, hey, there's the quote Shakespeare, Hamlet, there's more to heaven and earth, Horatio, than is dreamt of in your philosophy. Some of the things I saw, some of the things I've witnessed, some of the things I've experienced cannot be explained through the five senses. They go well beyond it. They, like as I say, and pierce the veil into realms, other dimensions. So yeah, I think deep within all of it, within humanity, is that understanding that there is something beyond what we can see, touch, feel, smell, or comprehend with our five senses.
I think there's a great scene in the movie Interstellar with Matthew McConaughey that I think is very fascinating. It's near the midpoint to the end of the movie, where he has somehow transcended to another dimension, if you will, where he's now looking back through what appeared to be the shelves that are on the wall of the home in which he came from on Earth, because he's, been blasted off into space and so forth. And I thought, wow, this is wild. And it's almost showing, well, it is showing a certain event that's taking place that actually took place earlier in the movie. And it's like he begins to understand the aspects of time, in that everything is happening almost like all at the same time. But one other aspect too is the discovery that we are all one. And I realize for a lot of folks, and this is something interesting that I heard while working for a Christian radio station back in the 80s and early 90s, but I didn't hear it from the station. I heard it from others I was associating with, that we create our own reality, totally contrary to the Christian philosophy, even at that time. And yet science has proven over and over again that we do create our own reality, because it's the choices that we make that have created the present that we're in today. I heard an interesting twist on this. I'd love your observations, that the choices we make today, yes, they do create the future that we are going to have. But one of my guests said it's actually our perception of what we think the future will be determines many of our choices today. Your thoughts?
Well, you mentioned Interstellar. You mentioned Interstellar, and one of the people I deal with in my book, Piercing the Veil, is Edgar Mitchell, who didn't travel interstellarly, but he traveled to the moon. And on his way back from the moon, he had a spiritual experience, which the yogis call samadhi, in which you talk about that nature of totality or oneness. And Edgar, and I knew him down here, I had some marvelous conversations with him. As a matter of fact, his daughter wrote the foreword to my book. But he entered the state of samadhi, a state that I had entered after spending 2 weeks in an ashram up in New York State. I came back to Fort Lauderdale and entered this state that was, for about 4 hours, was the most unbelievable state of consciousness that one could imagine. It really can't be described. Some people say the peace that passes all understanding. I think it's even different than that. You realize that you are eternal. And I realized that not only was I eternal, but I was eternity. You are existing in a just a state that you could spend eternity in. You are eternity.
Yeah.
And he experienced that. He came back and he launched his post-NASA career exploring the scientific foundation of spiritual experiences. He started the Institute of Noetic Sciences out in California, probably not too far from you, still functioning today. And that was his conclusion of the sense of being a part of everything, that we are stardust in a sense, that everything, all material, all the matter in the universe came from the stars. We are made of stardust, and we are connected to all things. So this idea has been known for millennia by spiritual people, particularly, I believe, in the Far East, the yogis and such, the idea of unity of existence. Now, influence in how we influence the future. Now, let me just talk about an event I had many, many years ago. I was on a golf course, and I went back in the days when I could hit a pretty long ball, and I made it to a par 5 and 2. And not easy for an amateur. And I had like a 40-foot putt that broke 6 feet. And I got over the putt and I said, don't 3-putt, don't 3-putt. And then I changed my perspective and I said, how many times are you going to be on a par 5 and 2? Go for the eagle. And as soon as I struck the ball, I knew it was the best putt I ever hit, curled down, died right into the cup. And I got the eagle. And the reason that happened was because I changed my perspective. Instead of saying, don't 3-putt, I went into a very positive perspective. Make it. And I made it. So, a materialist might say, oh, that's nonsense. That's just coincidence.
It's just hooey.
I think it was more than that.
Well,
and that's just a minor example of something.
Yeah, well, and what I find so interesting is so many people, they sometimes wonder why they are where they are in their lives, why they feel stuck, but they have never consciously taken a look at why they are stuck, in that they have not spent the time looking back. And it doesn't have to go that far back, although some people will go all the way back to their childhood, to see all of the choices that they have made that have placed them where they are today. I mean, all of the choices that I have made in my life and all of the people who have been involved in my progression and my growth have placed me right here, right now with you, Kingsley Guy. And I wouldn't be here if it weren't for all of those other people, but also the decisions that I made, the choices that I made. And, you know, I could go back and take a look at how the dominoes have fallen. Is it your perspective that it's possible for us to look ahead and see where those dominoes will fall?
Of course.
Okay.
But also expect surprises.
Sure.
You know, there, the great German philosopher Schopenhauer. Yeah, he made one of his statements. He said you have to get a little older to recognize this, but you look back at your life and you say, boy, what a mess! All these strange things happening. But then you get to a point in life where you look back at it and it seems like it was almost a orchestrated plan that got you to where you are, and where you are is perfect. So, you know, where are we going? I have lived in Fort Lauderdale for 44 years, very successful career down here in South Florida. But I said to myself this year, you know, kind of, where is the rest of my life going? And so I made a decision. I'm going to look into moving. And I started visualizing a place in the mountains of North Carolina. And guess what? In another month, I'm going to be living in the mountains of North Carolina if everything goes as planned. I have a contract on a beautiful house up there. I just have a contract on selling my condominium in Florida. You know, I certainly could stay here, but it's like, you know, where's my life going? I want the rest of my life, and I don't know how long that's going to be. I'm not a young man, but I want the rest of my life to have some sense of excitement, some sense of purpose, some sense of adventure, and also to be closer to nature, where I can come in contact maybe more with the spiritual dynamics of the world. Get up in the morning and hear the birds and hear the crickets as I go to bed at night. See the change of seasons, the cycle of life. You know, when I was when I mentioned sobered up about 34 years ago, I started exploring all the various religions. I read the Bible, the Quran, the Hindu scriptures, the Buddhist scriptures. And I remember a Hindu scripture or book on Hinduism that I read that talked about the well-lived life, where you start out as a young person, you learn, you grow up, you know, you learn things as a child, you get an education, and you grow up and you enter the work world and the family world. And then when you get to when that's over, you take what is known as sannyasa. You become you go out into the woods and you get closer to nature, and you prepare yourself for whatever comes after this this next life. And I'm not willing to go out as a hermit and sit in the woods, but I am willing to have this desire to get closer to nature, closer to the source, closer to let's say closer to reality than we sometimes are in this this world that we think is real. That maybe there's a reality out there far beyond you know, the materialistic world that we are caught up in. You know, one of the, you're out in California, one of the great experiences of my life, I was out there 20 years ago, and I accidentally ended up in a redwood forest. Didn't plan it, but whatever route I was taking, I ended up in the middle of this redwood forest. And I could sense a spirit of the woods, an intelligence, a consciousness that existed within this this redwood forest. And it was it was a very profound feeling that I had there. But yeah, we are a part of nature. We can't, I think we've tried to control it, and many senses, ways, I think maybe it's getting back at us for trying control it too much, but there is a consciousness out there that I seek to come more in contact with through this move. So.
Well, I think about that for years. Living in Phoenix, Arizona, I wanted to move close to the ocean. Now, I didn't know, nor did I specify where. All I know is I wanted to move closer to the water, and specifically the ocean. It could have been the Atlantic Ocean for all I knew. Could have been the Gulf Coast, because that's still part of the Atlantic Ocean. And the next thing I know, I'm moving to California, and I'm actually moving to the coast, which was quite remarkable to me in that, again, it wasn't something that I had expected, at least in terms of I dreamed about it, but I didn't put anything into it. You know what I'm saying? That it was one of those things that I just put it out there. Now, I do remember there was a job that I took, that I wanted, I should say. It was a job I wanted. I wanted to work for one of the local news talk stations, the number one station in Phoenix at that time, KTAR 620 News Talk Radio. And I grew up listening to that station, and it was number one for years. And I said, I want to work there. That would be so cool. Especially there were some of my favorite people that were there. And the next thing I know, so what I did was I took I think it was a legal size piece of yellow legal pad, and every line I wrote, I am working at KTAR 620. I am working at, I don't know how many times it was on. And I still have that, by the way. I still have that sheet of paper. And the next thing I know, even though it was weekends and overnight, I was working for that station. And I was also working with the various talents that I had grown up as a kid listening to, even on other stations. But it was about, I didn't put it together. I mean, this is what I was told to do, but it wasn't something that I was consciously putting together. Is that part of where we've got the disconnect in our lives, where we're doing it, but we're doing it unconsciously or subconsciously? And what we're talking about here, what you are talking about, especially in Piercing the Veil, you're talking about doing this on a conscious level, intentionally, having intent, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Intent, one of the people, you may know Jack Canfield.
Yes.
He was the originator of this Chicken Soup for the Soul series, very active in the movie The Secret. And The Secret. And as a matter of fact, on my website, kingsleyguy.com, there's a 15-minute interview of Jack Canfield interviewing me. And I'm happy to say very high praise for my book, both Piercing the Veil and my novel, Queen of the Heavens. But it's on my website, Piercing the Veil, or kingsleyguy.com. But that was part of what he is talking about in his other book, The Success Principles, talking about that, what you're talking about here, the visualization that I am working on this radio station, or this is what I desire in my life, and then to put that out consciously to then find this materializing. It's not something that you can just think about once in a while. It's something you have to make a conscious effort to think about. One of the things, and one of the events that I mentioned in Piercing the Veil is I was working on a second novel, and I needed some juice, needed some creative juice. So there's in the Vedic rituals, the East Indian rituals, if you say a mantra 41 times, or for 41 straight days, 108 times a day, what you want will materialize. I was, like I said, I wanted this creative juices to flow. So I decided to say a mantra to the Hindu goddess Saraswati, who is the goddess of creativity. And I did it 41 straight days, 108 times. And at the end of that, a couple of days after I had finished, I was attending a seance with a physical medium. And this is a culmination of my book. I write about this. This is where people think it's a bunch of fake hooey. It is not. Things flying around the room, hands appearing, sometimes spirit, parts of spirit being visible. And we were at a table levitation, and the table levitated. It went up, way up over my head. And, at the end, we held hands around the table, and the medium said, "Squeeze, squeeze," and plop, something dropped in the dark on the table. And so got a flashlight, and we looked at it, and believe it or not, it was a little icon, a little statue about that big of the goddess Saraswati. And the only person who knew I was saying this mantra was myself. This was not faked. But where did this little icon come from? It came out of, I don't know, some other dimension. That's the culmination of my book. But it was my intention to do this ritual, this Hindu ritual, and with the intention of creating creative juice inside of me. But what I got was an actual icon of the goddess. And I'll tell you, that inspired me. That inspired me to write this book. So, so what is our intention? What are our thoughts? Where are we putting our energies? That can materialize sometimes in very, very material form.
We are talking with Kingsley Guy. He is the author of Piercing the Veil. But we want to talk about your other book too, having to do, and I find this fascinating myself, having to do with an area that a lot of people have been studying for a long, long time, and that would be the area of Egypt. And that work is something that I think that people would be very interested in as well, as we continue talking here with Kingsley Guy. I'm Richard Dugan. This is Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. And we are having a wonderful chat here this afternoon, this morning, this evening, depending upon when you are listening to Guy Kingsley. GuyKingsley.com. Let's try that one again. I just reversed his name. It's Kingsley Guy. KingsleyGuy.com. There we go. We get it right. And Kingsley Guy is my guest, and we are talking about his work. And you know, I am still, and I'm just going to mention this just in passing. I'm still working on my book that I've been working on now for, well, 20 years, called Choices. And yet you've got these two books out. First of all, with Piercing the Veil, how long did it take you to, from the moment you had the inspiration to write it, how long did it take for you to actually see it in physical form?
Well, to actually write it, or let's say write 95% of it, because writing is rewriting, and it's got to go to your editor. So 95, I wrote a 95% of it in 6 weeks on a porch in the woods of North Carolina. But this was very much a journalistic book. I mean, I reported on events that actually happened to me. And I spent my life working with words. And this book came, I'm not going to say easily, but it really flowed. So now going in, then going into the publication process and such, it took another year to finally, get the artwork, to get everything together, to get it published, to reread it and correct all the mistakes. And I will say this. I would defy you to find a typographical error in that book.
It's been read and reread many, many times. Yeah.
Not only because of me, but because of a very fine editor who I've known for years, who helped me with it. The novel, on the other hand, Queen of the Heavens, was a different story. I was a journalist who, I always wanted to write a novel. As most journalists do, they want to be remembered something.
Well, unless Yeah, unless you're Woodward and Bernstein, and they'll be remembered for All the President's Men, is what they'll be remembered
Well,
for.
that's very true.
And I'll
Very
tell you
true.
what, you couldn't have written a better fictional story than the facts
Uh,
around Watergate. But let me ask you about Queen of the Heavens. Now, this is a novel, but it
yep.
kind of focuses on what it's like to awaken to the divine and know that our lives are informed and shaped by spiritual guidance from other realms. I want to talk about something I mentioned at the front end of the program, having to do with going within, trusting our intuition. You're going into an even broader perspective here, as far as I can tell, when you talk about spiritual guidance from other realms. And in one sense, one could say that our intuition is connected to those other realms. I know this is a novel, but so was James Redfield's Celestine Prophecy. It was a novel, but yours holds some great insights and profound lessons that we can all learn from. Talk to us about what you refer to as these other realms of spiritual guidance.
Yeah, well, let me go back. As I mentioned, at 40 years old, I discovered my alcoholism. That launched me on a spiritual journey. When I was a young man, I had studied in East Asia. I'd left home when I was 19 years old, studied in East Asia, crossed through India, and had an amazing experience in the holy city of Benares. Now I'm 20 years old. What do I know? I don't have any real spiritual or religious background. But the holy city of Benares, also called Varanasi, the holiest city in India, dedicated to Lord Shiva. And if you see the pictures of people going down to the river and bathing, those are generally taken in this city. So I'm 20 years old. I don't know, what is 20-year-old? No, not too much, but I'm standing outside. As a matter of fact, a 70-year-old sometimes thinks he doesn't know too much either. But I'm standing outside the Golden Temple in the city of Benares, and throngs of people are going into the temple. This is 1967. There weren't a lot of Westerners there at that point. Throngs of people going into the temple, and I'm feeling the sense of, boy, this could be 500 BC. The Buddha preached his first sermon just outside of this city about that time. I'm saying that I could be back in 500 BC. And I couldn't go into the temple because I wasn't a Hindu, but I feel somebody grabs my hand, and it's this old woman, no teeth, and she looks up at me and smiles, says something I couldn't understand, but hands me a fistful of flower petals and directs my hand to a passing sacred cow that eats flower petals. And it was like, whoa, it was a magical experience for me. It was just like a jolt of electricity went through me. And I was transported into I don't know where, but I made a pledge at this point. I said, I will someday return to this exact spot, and I will feed flower petals to a sacred cow. Now life gets in the way, and I went back to New York, got a job as a copy boy at the New York Times, had wonderful, wonderful experiences there for a few months, and that launched me on my journalistic career. But 20 years later, that's when I realized that my alcohol drinking had caught up with me. And I am on the spiritual journey. And I said, I'm going to go back to India. I'm going to honor that pledge, and I'm going to feed flower petals to a sacred cow. So I really feeling the spiritual sense about it. I get on a plane and I fly to Mumbai. And that spiritual sense, as I got off the plane and I saw the poverty and the poverty that indescribable for those of us who live in this country, it just sort of kind of shattered my belief system. I said, how could a loving God allow this poverty to exist? But I said, let's keep this going. So I went to, after 5 or 6 days in Mumbai, I went to Varanasi, and the same thing. I'm looking at the poverty, and I'm just getting the sense that my God, a loving God could not exist here. or could not allow this to exist. So I got on a bus and I went out to the city of Sarnath, just outside, where the Buddha preached his first sermon after enlightenment. And I'm sitting at the stupa next to where this took place, and I'm just feeling nothing. I'm just feeling empty. And I tour a museum with these figures of the Buddha date back to the 4th century, 5th century, and other Hindu sculptures, Indus River Valley sculptures date back thousands of years before that. And I just had this sense of mortality. I said, my God, there's no reason. There's nothing here. There's no reason for this existence. I'm going to die and nobody's going to know it. And I could die over here and nobody's going to, this utter fear just enveloped me. And I got on a bus heading back to Varanasi, and I said, what'll I do? So I started playing God Lift My Fear, praying, God Lift My Fear, for about 5 minutes. And I felt a warmth in my feet, and the warmth sort of came up through my body, and it took the fear in whoosh. It pushed it out the top of my head, and I didn't feel fear again for the rest of never felt fear like that since. So the next day is my last day in Varanasi. And I said, I'm going to feed the cow now. And it's dusk, and I go to the Golden Temple and I buy some flower petals and saying, okay, now I'm going to get that spirit. The animal passes and I feed it and nothing. I notice I fed a bull instead of a cow. So I bought more flower petals. And I make sure this is a cow the next time. And again,
now look for the udders. Look for the udders.
That's what I did. I looked for nothing. So I got down to the river, and there's thousands of people there who feel that, you see, this is the most sacred spot on earth. Thousands at dusk. And I'm sitting on a bench. I'll say I meditate at the Ganges. I hear a bump behind me or feel a bump behind me. I get up and turn, and there's a leper with no arms and no nose. And I'm just, oh my God, what am I doing here? And I'm just beside myself. So the last thing I decided to do, and like I said, my spiritual sense is gone. I said, I'm going to float one of these devotional candles in the Ganges and go up to the river, which is flat as a pane of glass. And some women were in front of me. They put their candles into the river and splashed their hands, and the candles floated out about 15 feet from the bank. And I put my candle in the river and asked for some sort of a spiritual experience that would get me out of this state that I was in. Splashed my hand, and the candle goes out 3 feet, and the current catches it and starts flowing back towards shore, towards me. And I think, my God, I've come halfway around the world to have a spiritual experience, and the Ganges is rejecting my offering. I can't even float a candle on the Ganges properly. Despair. And at the instant of that despair, a 3-inch frog surfaces from the muddy Ganges, and I see it like it happened today. And its left front leg, it grabbed the plate the candle was on, and it swam the candle out to the others and deposited it in the middle of the candle.
Wow.
Like, I was a baptized Catholic, but I never practiced it. I couldn't think of what to do other than stick my hand in the Ganges and genuflect, you know. And so I'm walking back at dusk, I'm walking back past the funeral pyres on the banks of the Ganges. People go there to be cremated, and dying to be cremated. And so I walked past it. And I said, I'm on the right track. I'm on the right track. So it was it's stories like that I write about in Piercing the Veil. That took me on a spiritual journey that got me to ashrams and got me to the state of samadhi, that got me into the movement of the Kundalini, all these Vedic things that happened because of that. But yeah, I went from that despair and that point where I completely surrendered at the banks of the Ganges, that frog showed up. And I even have a ring. I don't know if you can see it, but I've got a ring here that's
oh my
of a frog. I don't eat frog legs. Never sure would never eat frog's legs.
Ah,
What can I say?
that's probably a good idea in this case. Now, we're talking with Kingsley Guy. KingsleyGuy.com is the website. We will be linked to his website as well. You want to pick up a copy of Piercing the Veil or Queen of the Heavens. It's a novel, and we hope that you will do so and spend some time reading these things and grabbing the insights as he has been sharing them with us here on Tell Me Your Story. As we continue talking with Kingsley Guy on Tell Me Your Story, this is New Paradigms for a New World, giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. I'm Richard Dugan. And Kingsley, I want to ask you a little bit about, I mean, you've already shared it with us, and I've put this together, even if it is, so to speak, in reverse order, that you obviously were born and raised Roman Catholic, as was I. My introduction to all that you speak of, especially with your experiences in India, and I have not been. The closest I have been is through the words of Paramahansa Yogananda in Autobiography of a Yogi. That is what I consider my metaphysical primer. And there were many things that I have read and reread. I've probably read the book hundreds of times, especially because I would listen to it in what is today Audible. Back when I was listening to it as a legally blind young man and boy, was called Talking Books for the Blind and Recordings for the Blind. And I have to tell you that the reader really brought it to life. I really love the guy's voice. But it was so many of these wonderful stories, some of them that at first glance didn't make a lot of sense until you got to the end and it began to realize, oh, I see. And one of my favorites was the story that he told about the theater that he went to. And he was taken by his guru to a theater and was not real impressed by what they referred to as the cinescope back then. So they're outside the theater and his guru says, let me show you a different cinescope, and gives him a good thump on the chest. And he has that experience of awareness of everything around him. I mean, 360 degrees, probably spherical, not just horizontal, but all the way, and hearing things and feeling and seeing and all of those types of things. And the closest thing that we have in here in America in particular to something like that would be Disney and its 360-degree theater that you can walk into. They have the camera mounted on all kinds of different things. I think Google Earth kind of sort of does that now. They've got a camera like that you can actually do a 360 in one spot and you can see everything all the way around. And it's, to me, fascinating, including above, not so much to the ground, but the sky and all that. And I have to wonder about, again, our awareness of where we are that led you to the question, is that all there is? Because if we awaken ourselves like you went through that process, it seems to me like you would realize, wow, there is so much here. There is no question. Is that all there is? Look at all there is. What was it that brought that question to your mind and to your consciousness?
Well, that frog on the Ganges was one of the things you mentioned. But you mentioned Paramahansa Yogananda, and I haven't read it hundreds of times, but I've probably read it 5 times. Read it only a couple of years ago. Again, it was a very influential book in my life, and of course, his guru Sri Yukteswar, I guess, would be who you're speaking of. Expanded whatever the Sri Yukteswar transmitted to him. It expanded his state of consciousness, and that state of samadhi that I spoke about. I was up at the Sri Muktananda ashram in upstate New York for a couple weeks. I went through some Vedic rituals with Brahmin priests who had been flown over from India. I got back to Fort Lauderdale, felt some real anxiety. This is the day after I left, real anxiety. And that evening, I entered that state of samadhi for about 4 hours, the most profound state I have ever been in. And that sense that not only was I in eternity, I was eternity. That life it was a sense I could spend eternity like this. Now, whatever pleasurable experience you could have, after a week of it, I mean, you're probably going to say, well, I don't know if I can continue this. But this was not like that. This was like, yes, I could spend eternity like this, then the realization, I am eternity. And that really affects your entire outlook on existence, your entire outlook on life and death. And your entire outlook on what is consciousness. Is consciousness the activity of the brain, or is there something far greater that is consciousness of which we are a part? I tend to think of existence and of God. It's like we're corpuscle, like a corpuscle in our body is not Kingsley, but it is Kingsley.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like Kingsley is, or Richard, maybe corpuscles in a grand state of consciousness that you could call whatever you want. Call it God, call it source, call it whatever, the 0 point field. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems to be that sense that I have of what my existence is. I am more, I am this being in this three-dimensional world called Kingsley Guy, but this is a blip in the scheme of eternity, what we are experiencing now. But there is more to us than flesh and blood, for sure. So some of those experiences just when you have them, after you've had them, you just cannot look at the world the same way again. But people who haven't had them can't really, often can't understand what you're talking about.
That's true. That is true. And I have to say that my experiences of people having these incredible spiritual insights, if you will, I have never been one, and sadly, I have been around people who have been the type of individual who will say, "Oh, I'm sorry, that's not possible, because it doesn't say it in this ancient teaching or that ancient teaching. So I don't know what you experienced, but it wasn't of God." A matter of fact, I just received a book, it came in the mail today, having to do with, and I thought this was so sad in one sense that somebody would feel the need to write the book like this, but hey, we may have her on the program, having to do with the difference between biblical meditation and Eastern meditation. I can't see a difference, to be honest with you. The purpose to me of meditation is to commune, if you will, with the divine, with God, with self, that intuition, again, listening to the still small voice, find peace and calm. And, I just don't see a difference there. What are your thoughts about these kinds of concepts where, no, it has to be, if you're going to do it, then we're going to provide you with the proper way of doing this so you don't get in trouble. And I don't know why people think that they have to be the ones to save us, so to speak, from ourselves. But, and I do appreciate the fact that an individual cares that much, but I just sometimes wonder if that's really, really necessary. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Some of the things that I write about in Piercing the Veil and Queen of the Heavens, actually, I mean, would, from the perspective of some people, be looked upon as the works of the devil. But they're not. They are the seances I attended, the things that I witnessed are works of some force that I have no idea what is, but I am confident that they are all part of a divine plan and not part of any satanic plan. But sometimes, in the 19th century, there was a great movement, the spiritualist movement in this country, in which people attended seances, millions upon. Mary Todd Lincoln and Abraham Lincoln probably attended with her seances, where where you experience phenomenon that can't be explained by our even our sciences today. A lot of it was fake, but a lot of it was not. A lot of it was very real. And the sights I witnessed and experiences I had, including the appearance of that little statue, just told me, hey, there is a consciousness greater than our consciousness. Now, we tend to be tribal as humans. You're brought up with this thought process, and well, the person brought up with another thought process is got to be evil, and just our tribal nature. Not so much in the East, though. It's one of the things that attracted me to yogic thinking was that call God. You want to call God Shiva, call God Vishnu, call God Jesus. They're all God.
Yeah.
And you don't have that ideological separation that you get too often in the West. Now, I think some of that is changing. Much greater acceptance. I think the Catholic Church has accepted the fact that it is a great organization, but it is one of other organizations whose purpose is the same, and that is to lead people in a spiritual life and enable them to have the spiritual experiences that can be life-changing and that can allow them to function in a world that sometimes seems out of control.
Yeah.
So I think some religions focus so much on controlling behavior rather than changing consciousness, and I think the object of the spiritual experience is to enhance and expand our consciousness into realms that go beyond the material.
Kingsley Guy is my guest. We're talking with him about his work, the work that he's doing at his website, where you can get more information about his book, Piercing the Veil, as well as Queen of the Heavens, which is a novel, kingsleyguy.com. We will be linked to his website as well, and we certainly hope that you will go there to continue your evolutionary transformational process. And we are excited to have him on the program, a returning guest to this program as we continue to bring you new paradigms for a new world. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true here on Tell Me Your Story. And Kingsley Guy is here to help us to do that, giving us his insights and examples from his life and his research, his searching, if you will. I remember telling one of the programmers on that Christian station that I was on my search. And they said, oh, well, when you find Jesus, your search is over. And I was actually astute enough to be able to respond to them kindly. Well, actually, my belief is that once I find Jesus, my search has just begun. And one of the aspects you talk, the title, for example, Queen of the Heavens. And I think about the question, is that all there is? And I think of what I've experienced in Life Between Lives hypnosis that I went through about a year or so ago, maybe more than a year ago. And I think about the descriptions of what heaven will be in the Christian philosophy. And that's where that question really comes. Is that it? That's all there is? And I think after everything we've been through here on this planet, in this realm, that's it. That's where it stops. And it just, and I'm not criticizing anybody who believes that. It's not my point. It's just from my standpoint, with a curious brain that was given to me by the Creator, it just doesn't fit. It's like, that might as well just be lights out, Kingsley, because if that's all there is, I want lights out.
Yeah. There's one of the people, and I haven't started posting my blogs yet, but I've written a blog, several blog posts. One of them is about a person named Alfred Russel Wallace. And Wallace, you might know the name, he conceived simultaneously but independently of Charles Darwin, the concept of evolution through natural selection. And he sent his paper to Darwin before publishing, and Darwin said, "Holy smokes, this guy's thinking the same thing I'm thinking." So they actually joint published their papers, and in the 19th century, it was called the Darwin-Wallace theory. If Wallace had gone ahead and published it, probably would have been called the Wallace theory of evolution. But he was a naturalist, and this was the time of the spiritualist movement that I mentioned, where the seances, these amazing events took place at these seances. And he came back from his studies in Asia and said, "Hey, I'm a scientist. I'm a little skeptic, but I'm a scientist. There may be a force of nature that we don't know anything about. And as a scientist, I've got an obligation to study it." And he went ahead and he studied it, and he concluded, "Hey, this stuff is real." And he's written brilliantly about it, in which he kind of skewers many of the scientists of his age who thought it was all a bunch of hooey. But as he developed the idea of the survival of the fittest in the material world, creating the diverse biosphere that we have, he came up with the idea of the progression of the fittest in the afterlife. In other words, there is a progression in which we steadily climb as our consciousness perfects itself in higher and higher and higher and higher. And we speak of the 7 levels of heaven. And the Hindu philosophy, there's the different lokas where you can go to different levels of consciousness. Until eventually you reach the highest level of consciousness, which is the state of cosmic consciousness, where you are becoming, as I said before, eternal, and you are eternity. So the progression we progress. Some people would say we progress through reincarnation. Others would say that we progress in different spiritual realms and move upward until we achieve that point of total merger with the Godhead. So, there's so much that can't really be spoken about with absolute authority, but as we started this conversation out, that there is a sense among humanity that there is something more than just the material world that which we are a part. So.
Well, it is one of those things that we continue to, well, in some cases we do. We continue to struggle with. We continue to wonder, okay, so now what? And I have to say that there is actually a part of me that sort of envies individuals who are actually able to intentionally go into an out-of-body state. I mean, because I can only imagine what that's like. I can only imagine. And it's like the way they describe it there. I'm outside, I can see my body and I can do these things. Now, I've had dreams where I can see myself doing certain things. But usually I'm seeing myself through my eyes. I can see my hand, just like now, I can see my hands and I can see my legs and my arms and so forth, but it's not the same thing. Have you ever had that kind of an experience, either a near-death or out-of-body experience, especially through some of the things? And I know samadhi is certainly a different state, kundalini and all of those other practices. What about that? Have you ever had that?
I have not had an out-of-body experience, but I have had a profound experience of what's called in the East the witness. And the witness, that part of us that is eternal and sort of is able to observe totally uninvolved with our day-to-day life. I had that experience. I was diving off the coast of Fort Lauderdale, and I'm at about 70 feet. And that point, I thought I was a really good diver, scuba diver. And 70 feet is fairly deep dive. And I got caught up in the spirit of a lobster hunt. And I went after this huge lobster and didn't know I was sucking my air as quickly as I was. And I then realized, holy smokes, I'm in trouble. So I went to the anchor line to try to come back up, and took a breath, and nothing. My tank was empty, and I signaled to my buddy that it was a novice. I was out of air, and he had no understanding of what I was signaling. So I had said a prayer, "Dear God, please help." And I had this instant impulse to just swim for the surface. And as I was going towards the surface, this tremendous calm overcame me. And it was like the feeling, I may live or I may die, and it doesn't matter because I am eternal. Total calm as I went up, didn't know if I would make it or not, totally out of air, doing what you do to try to survive, breathing out as you're going up, whatever air is left in me. And finally, I started seeing the rays of sun, and boom, I came into the surface. And then I started to panic a little. I got my vest inflated. I got to the boat, but it was that, and I mentioned that in Piercing the Veil, that event. And I didn't come down with the bends. I did come down with the compression sickness, some nausea and fever that night, but I didn't get the bends. But it was just that sense that I may live, I may die, it matters not, I am eternal. And that was, as I looked back at it, that and learned more about concepts, spiritual concepts, Eastern yoga concepts, that was the witness that showed up. And the witness showing up actually saved my life. It just totally calm and understanding that I was an eternal being. So not an out of body experience, but it was the witness kind of observing and observing, totally uninvolved in the outcome.
Wow. And that's really, I think, what it comes down to sometimes, is that we have to let go. You mentioned something that I would consider your, if this is the right phrase, Buddhic experience of at the Ganges there with the power, with the candle and then the frog. You basically stopped. You just stopped, just like the Buddha. He finally got to the point where he's exhausted. He sat down under the Bodhi tree, says, I'm just gonna stop. And boom. Yep. It's when we stop looking or, pressing, if you will, that it usually happens.
Yeah. Maybe surrender.
Surrender. That's a better word. Yes, absolutely.
Just surrender. This is it. I can't do it anymore.
Man.
Boom. It happened.
Indeed. And it's one of those areas where we sure want it to happen. We really do. We want it. And it just won't happen. And so we have to let it go.
Yep.
And once we do, and this is the way it was phrased to me. Stop trying to control the process and become part of the process. And that was the saying that was given to me many years ago in order for me to get through what I needed to in terms of this incredible world in which we live and the things that we're doing. And there are times, I got to tell you, that I listen to that still small voice. I've shared this experience. I was experiencing some financial challenges, And I got the prompting to do something that was totally contrary to everything I was trying to do in the finances. And I thought about it, and I so to speak fought it, and I fought it, and I fought it. And then I said, okay, all right. And afterwards, after I had done what I had been asked to do, I realized that if I hadn't done it when I did, it would have been far worse. And that's one of the things that I want you to talk a little bit about in terms of listening to that intuitive voice, that still small voice. Mm-hmm. Am I correct in what I say to people that it will never put you in harm's way? It might challenge you, but it's not going to put you in harm's way. And it's there to help you.
I can speak from personal experiences that listening to that small voice has sometimes led me into big challenges, but challenges that by still listening to that small voice, be able to come and become a better person as a result of it. But following that small voice, following the synchronicities, those, what would you call them, the coincidences with meaning, like when the frog grabbed the candle in the Ganges, that launched me into a pursuit of a spiritual path that took me today, because I listening to a suggestion from a member of my staff, that because I liked history so much, that when I was going over to cover some stuff in Israel, that I ought to go to Egypt, and just listening to that and saying, yeah, okay, I hadn't planned on doing it, but maybe I will. Going to Egypt, and the event going to Egypt changing my life, and going back to Egypt and changing my, pursuing my Egyptian understanding, what that did to my life. So every time I've listened to that small voice and followed the synchronicities, it's led to a more fulfilling life. So where did that voice come from? Did it come from inside, or does it come from a guardian angel, or it come from both places simultaneously? Or we talked earlier about the unity of existence, and kind of the matrix that makes up all things. So if there was advice I give to people I've sometimes talked to, is follow the synchronicities. Don't be afraid. If you're at that point if you're at that jumping off point, jump and see where it leads. Yeah.
I will tell you that when my wife and I had both lost our jobs in 2006, mine due to the station selling to a Christian consortium, and they were not going to keep on any of the old staff. And my wife working in basically a very hostile work environment in a hospital. We were sitting there March 1st watching TV that evening, both unemployed. And she came over and she sat down and she says, I'm scared. I mean, I feel like we're on the edge of a precipice. And I said, well, let me just say that, and I at that time did not have any fear, having lost my job, because I'd gone through the year 2000. I had gone through the year 2000, 2001 actually, and I had been laid off from 4 different jobs. And within 2 weeks of each of the departures or the layoffs, I found another job. So here we were, March 1st, 2006. And I said, well, everything I know and I've read and experienced and they all say when you come to the edge of a cliff or precipice, either or, you do 2 things. You jump and you trust. That's how I am here with you today, Kingsley Guy. That's how that happened. And by the way, coincidence, I repronounce it, coincidences. Incidents that happen collectively, if you will, in concert. I don't believe in coincidences. I really don't. I believe that these events that happen where paths cross and meaning is there and things happen that help us. I think that it's the divine, it's the universe that's just trying to help us if we will just let it. And I think that's part of the problem, isn't it? That we just won't let the universe help sometimes because we think with that God-given brain, as well as the ego, we think we know better, don't we?
Yeah. And, talking about the jumping off point, I'm at that point in my life where, as I mentioned earlier, I'm packing up after 44 years in Florida, taking a chance. I mean, I'm 74 years old. I'm at that point where, well, maybe I ought to be considering, heading for the assisted living facility. No, not me. I'm going out to the mountains of North Carolina.
There you go. There you go.
I want juice in my life. I want to live it to the fullest capacity. So,
well,
it's a choice, but
yeah.
But I think it would.
Yeah, I'm going to keep working on that vision of living in Ireland. I've flown over twice with my wife, had fabulous times both times, and I think that the one incredible experience, speaking of time, is that we were there the first time for 2 weeks. When we flew into Shannon and we got our rental car, I felt as though it was week 3 of a month-long vacation. It was like we picked up right where we left off, and that was so cool. It really was. I was quite jazzed by that, especially considering that when we went over the first time for the first 2 or 3 days that we were there, I experienced something I did not ever expect to: severe homesickness. Because I didn't know where we were going to stay beyond the 2 nights or 3 nights at the hotel that we were at. And it wasn't until I got out of my emotions and we started searching for a B&B down in County Waterford, and we found it and so forth. But boy, what great opportunities that we have, Kingsley. And it sounds to me like through Piercing the Veil, it helps to you're showing us how to open up the possibilities so that we can pierce that veil and we can see what else there is. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's a very fair assessment, that life is progression. And for me, I've always needed adventure in my life. When I was 19, I packed up and went overseas. I went back to India. I've done a lot of things that sometimes very fearful, but you can't let fear impede doing what you want to do, because things work out. Things will work out. And sometimes and often they'll work out better than you ever could have imagined they would. So, like I said, when you're standing at the edge and should I jump or not? Jump. And that's what I'm doing now, and I feel good about it. So
there you go. And that's the real key: feeling good about it, finding that happiness. I want to let our listeners know this is Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We're talking with Kingsley Guy, kingsleyguy.com. We will be linked to his website. You can see this interview on YouTube, on the YouTube channel, as well as going to the podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, and other outlets, as well as listening to the broadcast on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m. And we do stream live at those times as well. So we hope that you will take a listen or take a watch. I'm Richard Dugan. This is Tell Me Your Story, and we are talking with Kingsley Guy. Kingsley, this has been a fabulous time together. I'm so excited that we were able to reconnect and talk more about this. I wanted to talk more. We won't do it today, but I wanted to talk more about your experiences in regards to Egypt, specifically in the story of the Queen of the Heavens.
Be happy to. Yeah.
And I also, before we go, for those who are watching the interview, you look like you're down in one of the tombs somewhere in Egypt, in one of the pyramids. What is that wonderful image behind you, or
That
that
is
real stuff?
yeah, that's actually a screen that I bought, boy, 25 years ago at least, when I got my interest in Egypt. Somebody showed me an advertisement in Architectural Digest or some book or magazine, and I said, I need that. So I bought it, and it's been with me for 25 years. So it's not electronic or anything. That is an actual screen that you can fold up, and
That
so
it looks great, I have to tell you. I mean, I love mine with Kildare Abbey behind me in Ireland, but yours looks fabulous. Like you are down, like I said, you're down in the catacombs somewhere, maybe
yeah,
doing your
yeah.
research.
Or maybe yeah, Temple of Luxor or someplace like that.
Oh, I
Back in
like.
the days when the columns and the temples were all brightly painted, but they aren't
Oh, yeah.
anymore. But they were all brightly painted. So
Absolutely. Well, I have three final questions that I'm going to ask you as we wrap up this program today. And just a reminder, folks, Kingsley Guy is the website, kingsleyguy.com. Piercing the Veil is his latest work, as well as pick up a copy of Queen of the Heavens, and that's plural. And that's something else we'll talk about the next time we get together as well. Egypt seems to be a real interest to a lot of people because there are so many questions that still remain unanswered, whether it has to do with the pyramids and the tombs, I'll call it the magic of Egypt. Okay. And every civilization seems to have some kind of magic. The Irish with their Celtic heritage and so forth. So we'll get together again and talk more about that. I want to remind our listeners that this program is on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com, as well as during this special edition of Tell Me Your Story. We're also on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, and many other locations that you folks are reposting to. If this program resonates with you and you'd like to be a part of it, we would greatly appreciate any support financially that you can give us. That is the reason why I have a PayPal account for your security as well as ours. And please participate in the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, and go within, listen to that still small voice, get in touch with the divine higher self of you, and find that calm, peaceful place as we begin to transition into a new era. A new era is here right now. Just spend the time going within and just, it'll be great. I guarantee you, it'll just be great. So the three questions that I always ask my guests, and a lot of times you will have answered them during the interview, but I like to ask these directly. And they are, number one, sound like David Letterman with a top 10 here. Who is Kingsley Guy?
Who is Kingsley Guy? Well, kind of a multifaceted person, and the person who spent his life in a very materialistic profession in which he really couldn't speak about some of the subjects we talked about while I was employed in the newspaper business, but can speak about them now. So I would say Kingsley Guy is a person who likes to explore things and try to pass on whatever discoveries I find by writing about them. So I think that at this point in my life, that's pretty much what I am. Mm-hmm.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you're doing now?
Well, I would like to do, I think, to a large degree, what you are doing, and that is open people up to the understanding that that existence is not what we are able to perceive through the five senses, that there is so much more to this universe than what we can see, feel, smell, touch, hear, and that's why I wrote these books. Yeah.
Finally,
that I think is. Mm-hmm.
And finally, what is your life's purpose?
My life's purpose at this point is to An old professor I had in Korea said, Kingsley, if you want to get through life with your sanity, do two things: pursue knowledge and enjoy life. So I think that along with trying to present some of these ideas to a wider public that we've been talking about, pursue knowledge, enjoy life. That's what I'm looking forward to doing for whatever, the next many years ahead of me.
Well, wonderful. And we hope to be a part of that by having you back again to continue our conversation. And I thank you so much for giving us so much time here on the program.
My pleasure, Richard, and keep doing what you're doing. You're serving a noble purpose.
Well, thank you. And I thank you for listening and watching. Tell me your story, New Paradigms for a New World. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help you make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to love.